I just wanted to share some things that I learned about responsibility recently. So that's what this video is going to be about. So the first thing I wanted to address is that people kind of get confused with responsibility and blame, but they're not the same thing. So true responsibility isn't really focused about whether or not like you're a good or bad person. You know, being responsible doesn't mean that you have to like make yourself feel bad or guilt yourself, you know. And I find that people kind of get stuck in this idea of blaming themselves when they think of responsibility, because this kind of goes into the whole duality of good and bad and good and evil and stuff. And ironically, it's just a way that we use to organize things and navigate our world, but sometimes people just subconsciously judge things that way. And so what happens is that we don't really use good and bad so much for organizing things, but rather to separate bad things away from us and associate good things with us, you know. So what ends up happening is that when you end up having to discover something about you that you haven't known before that you would consider bad or not good, then you kind of feel bad because like all the judgment that you've put out there to separate from you is now a part of you, and then you have to be unconditional love with that. But the thing is that when you're judging, you can't be unconditional love with that, and so you end up like feeling bad and you guilt yourself, and then you judge yourself, and then you don't like yourself. And ironically, the more that you keep enforcing the judgment and enforcing the blame and like the guilt, the more it's gonna stick with you. So it's not really gonna fix itself that way, right? So so like people just kind of have this way of associating good things with them and like bad things for anything that's not them, you know. And that just kind of gives you like it kind of goes into your ego, because like it kind of gives you a greater sense of self, you know what I mean, and a little bit of self-righteousness as well. So yeah, responsibility versus blame, not the same thing. Okay. I think there was something else I wanted to talk about, but I forget. Oh yeah, when you have too much guilt, it kind of put too high of standards on yourself, you know. And so you kind of have unrealistic expectations for you, and your standards are too high and things like that. But then of course you're going to blame yourself for not meeting those standards, and then you're going to feel bad about it, and then it's going to keep on happening. So, you know, guilt isn't really going to serve you that way, you know. Blame, it's kind of the same thing, I guess. You know, you blame yourself, you feel guilty. So with real responsibility, you just kind of like, you're aware of it, you're aware of what's going on. You don't need to judge it, but you move on, you know. Responsibility, sometimes people feel so guilty to the point where they feel responsible for things that they can't control, and they feel, you know, guilty about that, or they blame themselves for that, for things that aren't really a part of them. And I think that just might have to do with like a shadow, that maybe some people blame you a lot, and so you kind of carry a burden of having to take an unhealthy amount of responsibility on yourself. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say about that. And then I was talking about, so we already spoke about the responsibility and guilt and blame, and now what was it? I forgot the other thing I was going to talk about. Oh yeah, responsibility and laziness. That was an interesting thing that I've learned recently. And this is something that is really good to understand why you're lazy. So it turns out that you procrastinate a lot because you're not confident. The thing is, if you were confident, you would like do more things. There would be more action involved because you're confident, right? But the thing is that people kind of want to be motivated, and I mean, motivation is nice, but it's not everything. And people think that that's the first step to doing something, but that's, you know, not really true. The thing is that you're not really going to get confidence until you do things that you're not confident in, and then you'll be motivated to continue, which is kind of like a backwards thing that most people have in their minds. So people are kind of obsessed with being motivated so that way they can do things, but the trick is to just do it, and then you'll actually get somewhere. You know what I mean? So basically there's no growth in the comfort zone and no comfort in the growth zone. So you kind of have to pull yourself out of, you know, out of that mindset, really. And it can be challenging because, you know, doing anything that's new is kind of scary, but also everything is scary when you don't know who you are. But you're not really going to know who you are until you face your fears and do your shadow work, and then you'll figure out more about yourself than you realize, and then things will kind of be less scary. But of course there's always going to be things that are new that are going to challenge you and stuff, but you'll have I guess you could say a better self-image, I suppose, and you'll just feel more confident and things like that. So you'll grow a lot from doing that. So yeah, you don't really need motivation, but it's nice, but you don't need it. So another thing, I think I already finished that. So I was talking about, oh yeah, so taking responsibility is, it's a frequency that most people struggle with, and it, you know, I think it's because people don't really understand how real responsibility works, so they put blame on themselves, and then they have a shadow there, and then they don't know how to fix their shadow, so then they kind of get stuck in there. But the thing about responsibility is that it pushes you out of the victim mindset. It pushes you out of the shadows, and it's, of course, it's, you know, it can be scary and stuff, but like people tend to think that like complaining about things is doing something, but it's not. So you're just gonna complain about things and you're just gonna stagnate. You're not gonna get anywhere because, you know, you're stagnating and you're complaining, which isn't doing anything. You know, but sometimes people suffer enough where they sometimes change their minds, and then they decide, okay, I need to stop complaining and do something. Sometimes it takes a lot of suffering for people to realize that. Sometimes. So yeah, it's easy to complain. That's why so many people do it. But also, you'd find that the more gratitude you have, the less you complain, and the more action you're going to do, and you're just going to be happier in general. So, you know, when you're complaining, like, you're judging, so you can't be grateful for anything if you're judging, and you can't be unconditional love if you're judging. So it just kind of helps you to move on and stuff. But try to learn not to complain, because it's not going to help you, you know. It makes a big difference, you know. I think some people don't realize how many times in a day that they complain. You know, I realized this and I was like, wow, I complain a lot. So, but you know, eventually I kind of learned to be more grateful and stuff. But it's interesting, you know, just how much we tend to not realize how much we complain in our life. Okay, so basically, what's another thing I was going to talk about? Okay. I think that, like, one of the ultimate responsibilities we could have is doing our shadow work, because it clears, like, a lot of karma. It makes us happier. You know, I learned a lot from, you know, from shadow work, I think, and I think I already kind of spoke about that. But the thing is that it's like a constant thing, because, you know, the ego is always the first agenda in our life. Some people will think it's like other things, but no, it's like you're always living you know, according to like the level of ego you have or like the frequency you have. So like it's a constant thing that you have to deal with. So like you have to constantly do your shadow work if you like kind of want to get better. So the things responsibility has taught me is that like you don't need motivation, and problems are opportunities for growth, and also if you're not willing to help yourself, nothing will really help you. Also what you choose to do with yourself is more important than the events that happen to you. And also you kind of have to learn to you know, not be lazy for interpretations of things. A lot of times the problem isn't the problem, but the problem is the way that we look at the problem is the real problem. And so sometimes we just kind of need to shift our perspective of things, you know, because like if you're being too judgmental about something and you're aware of it, you can kind of try to like figure out how to change that perspective, so that way you remove the judgment and you actually empower yourself, because you know, there's power in not being judgmental, because it means you can have gratitude and you can have unconditional love, and you know, unconditional love is very powerful. What else did I want to say? Oh yeah, like don't blame like your interpretations of things, like I said earlier, like actually try to learn to change your perspective and how you interpret things. So don't be lazy with that, and don't blame that, you know, don't blame that. So yeah, I think that's all I was gonna say. I hope this helps somebody.